It is currently 11 minutes away from the top of the hour. We have a caller on the line, and he is a member of the Garden Emergency Branch. Of course, you would appreciate, we will not ask of him his name, but you have some observations to make. Thank you for calling. Thank you for listening. Hello? Okay, I had him there for a moment, and I think I just lost him. As I said, it does not mean that he hung up. It simply means that we could be having some trouble with our telephone
Can you try
connection.
calling again, please, sir? Because
yes.
we'd very much like to get your input into this. In all fairness, we'd like to hear all sides of the story. And as we celebrate Father's Day, of course, there are many fathers languishing in prison as well, and we take cognizance of that. But in 2013, as recently as 2013, there were riots behind bars by prisoners who claimed victimization after the shooting death of off-duty prison officers Andy Rogers in Malabar. And the frequency, that's why I mentioned the 2013 incident, because of the frequency. Now, 22 wounded on remand yard in Golden Grove Prison. 22 prisoners and, of course, several prison officers. We have, at last count, at least 7 prison officers wounded in what has been described as a riot. And over the weekend, the court was meeting on Saturday, and as a group of attorneys tried to bring some justice for the prisoners, they went to the High Court to demand the right to get photos of the injuries that were suffered by the prisoners as well. We've asked Gerald Ramdeen, one of the attorneys on that team, to speak with us and explain what went on behind bars as well. And we also have lined up for you Sharon Richards, who is the president of the Prison Officers Association. We told Mr. Richards that we're going to be calling him this morning, so we get both sides of the story. Mr. Ramdeen, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Sharmain, and good morning to all your listeners, and happy Father's Day to all the fathers who are listening as well.
Thank you. The issue of this riot, the report, part of it said, prisoner's side, is that there was a raid the night before, and they retaliated because they feared what would happen the next morning. The guards say something different. They were merely doing a check, and they were attacked. Give us your best understanding of this. Make clear for our listeners what your side represents.
Well, from my instructions, what I can say is that on Tuesday night, there was a group of officers. Now, these officers are normally referred to as the Emergency Response Unit. They're called the ERU. And these are officers who are specially trained to do searches in the prison. There are a special squad of officers. And these officers came to do searches in the prison. Now, my instructions are that when the officers came to the cells, they pinpointed, they identified certain individuals. And the only common thread that runs through the individuals that they identified were that these were all individuals who followed the Islamic faith. There was one person who was an imam, they identified him, and they identified them by names. So they knew who they were going and who they were looking for. Now, my version of the events as dictated by my clients are that some of the inmates indicated to the officers when the officers approached the cells, we have no difficulty in you searching the cells, but you all have told us before on 2 occasions, come out of the cells for you all to search. And when we come out of the cells, you all beat us. So we want to make clear that you all are not going to repeat this. The officers didn't take that very lightly and proceeded in the cells, extracted the prisoners from the cells, and started to assault and batter them. Following that, what the officers did is that they took buckets of water and dashed it in the cells. And I think that is really the catalyst that provoked what transpired in the following morning, which was Wednesday morning. Because what happened then was that other inmates in the remand section then decided to retaliate by what we in common prison parlance is termed as pailing the officers, which is, as you all know, in the remand section of the Golden Grove Prison, there are no toilets, and therefore, in 2015, you are still operating a prison system where you have 8 and 9 prisoners in a cell using a pigtail bucket as a substitute for a toilet.
God.
And what some of the inmates did is, in retaliation, when the officers came the morning after, they took the pails of feces and urine, and from in the cells, they would dash it on the officers as they approach. Now, one could understand the unpleasantness of that experience for an officer, it is a very dehumanizing, degrading experience.
Yes.
And it is not something that any person would take very well. And therefore, what that did is that escalated the animosity between the inmates and the officers to the extent that when the cells were open, there was what one can possibly term a riot, because the officers were trying to get control of these inmates who did this. And the inmates themselves were upset by the fact that these officers, I wouldn't say these officers, because there's a different squad of officers that work the batch, which is the normal officers, from the officers who came in the night before and assaulted and beat their fellow inmates.
You know, just so that our listeners are very clear, we're not talking about in prison. We're talking about in remand. These are folks who are awaiting appearing.
Well, I want to make that point very clear for two reasons. The first is that these are persons that are on remand, and they are presumed to be innocent.
Right.
And they are people who are awaiting trial, and people who have not yet been convicted of any offense, and therefore they are subjected to these conditions, which I repeat over and over again in the public domain, that have been held by the High Court to be cruel and inhumane to subject a human being to these conditions since 2008, so that this is not something this is something that crosses the political barriers, because successive administrations have done nothing about it to improve the conditions in the prison, when the High Court has declared, Madam Justice Gobin, in the case of the same inmate that I'm telling you about, who was the Imam, Colin Edgell, in his case, he brought a constitutional motion.
Unbelievable. Gerald Ramdeen is our guest. He's the attorney representing those grieved, those who were in remand. I can't say prisoners, because you get the feeling, if you talk, prison officers too. I mean, everybody, we're talking about victims on both sides of this here. And the victims, I believe they are the end result of neglect, because what you are describing here, folks who are innocent have not yet gone to have their cases adjudicated, being subjected to these kind of conditions. It is unbelievable. Sharmain?
Okay, Gerald, so therefore that's the situation. Let us know what happened over the weekend. You all, at what time did you all go to the courts on yesterday?
What transpired is this, Sharmain, is that as lawyers, what our experience has been when we take up these cases to help these people who have no one else to go to, is that when you look at the medical records that are prepared by the prison doctor, and you get your instructions from the person who has suffered at the hands of the officers, you have two poles apart in terms of the different versions of events, so that an inmate will tell you, I was beaten, my head was busted, I got welt marks over my back, my legs. And when you look at the medical report that the prison produces at the end of the day, you would see a medical report saying no visible injury seen. And one wonders, how is this possible? So we took the unprecedented step in this particular scenario to ask the High Court, or firstly to request of the Commissioner of Prisons, to allow us to take pictures of the injuries so that we can preserve the evidence for later on when these matters come to trial. We were refused, and then we proceeded to the High Court to challenge by way of judicial review that decision, the refusal of the Commissioner. And what we were met with is a response by the state that there is a blanket policy that no photographs are to be taken in prison. And that was what we went to challenge, and Justice Ronnie Budusing in the San Fernando High Court ruled in favor of the prisoners, saying that it is irrational for such a policy to be pursued by the Commissioner of Prisons. That decision was then appealed to the Court of Appeal, because Justice Budusing, in ruling for the prisoners, then decided that he would make an order, one, to quash that policy, and two, to allow the attorneys to attend on the prison yesterday at 2 p.m. and to take photographs of the injuries that were visible at that time on these persons who were allegedly beaten by the officers.
Okay, Gerald, but
the inmates are suffering because they are being held in unconstitutional conditions. And the officers are suffering as well because they have no right to be subjected to those conditions to carry out their daily work.
All right,
Understood.
Gerald, let's get to the bottom of what you are saying but not saying. There is a special unit in the prison service that comes out and does this kind of thing.
That is exactly the position. It's called the Emergency Response Unit. It's called the ERU.
And used randomly, and it's a kind of like, it's checked because they are dealing with criminals, although innocent until proven guilty, are
Sharmain,
hyped up
and I want
to
you-
do this
and
kind of thing.
I want the listeners to understand that what took place on Tuesday is a smaller version of the massive riots that took place in 2006.
Yes,
Because
I
in
remember
2006,
that, yes. Yeah.
what transpired, and I was involved. I led the litigation that is now in the Court of Appeal for all of those inmates who won their cases, or as a result of the 2006 riots. Because in 2006, what happened was that they brought in the army and they brought in special reserve police officers to go into the prison and beat these people, extract them, and that is what took. You cannot have a prison system, Sharmain, and speak about restorative justice and reforming inmates and everything that sounds nice when you speak about it. And then you have this going on behind prison walls.
Gerald Ramdeen, you make a very good point. I love the fact that you take the broad view of representing all the parties and identifying that they are all from the level of the regular officers and to the many citizens who are in remand. They are all victims of this. We do appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning, and we will be calling, as you would expect, on you again later on.
No problem. Thank you very much, Sharmain, and have a good day and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you
Same to
very much.
Thanks
Have
very
yourself a
much.
great
And
Father's Day.
Mr. Bishop, earlier, Dr. Dave Saran, in our research and preparing for this interview, he had gone into the prison and provided a report as
Yes.
well. And as you all were speaking, I was looking at this when he called on the media fraternity to deepen its interest in
Yes, he
what
did.
he described it as. These are very interesting words. The war against humanity in Trinidad and Tobago. Dave Saran also called on the judiciary to visit the prisons and see the facilities they are sending individuals to.
From what you're describing there, you're in there for 10 years, you're defecating in a bucket, you've got an overcrowding situation, you were asked to live, almost exist as an animal, and you have not been convicted of anything.